It's not every day you hear about constituents trying to recall a sitting senator.
Right.
Like, that's a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine that level of, dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
So today we are diving into this fascinating situation that's unfolding in Nigeria,
Okay.
where a recall process has reportedly been initiated against Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan,
Wow.
who represents Kogi Central Senatorial District. Now, we got our hands on a transcript
Okay.
from a TVC News Nigeria YouTube video,
All right.
which gives us a real-time glimpse into the discussions and different perspectives surrounding this significant move.
So we're going to break this down.
Yes, and our goal is to cut through the noise and help you understand the core reasons behind this recall attempt,
Oh,
what the actual process looks like, and the various viewpoints at play.
sounds good.
All without, getting lost in speculation or taking sides ourselves.
Right.
So let's start with what seems to have sparked this whole thing, this action.
Okay.
What's the initial picture here?
Well, from the news segment, what's striking is the visual they describe.
Okay.
A significant number of constituents gathered in Okan local government area. Now, that's a key administrative division within the Kogi Central Senatorial District.
Okay.
Think of it like a county within the broader constituency.
Okay.
And they were reportedly there to sign a petition
Wow.
for Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan's recall.
Okay.
The immediate thought presented in the video is that these constituents might be feeling a lack of representation, especially considering her recent suspension from the Senate.
Wow. So a physical gathering to sign a recall petition, that really signals a strong sentiment,
It does.
doesn't it?
It really does.
What kind of deep-seated frustration do you think would drive people to take that kind of collective action?
It suggests a significant level of public dissatisfaction.
Right.
However, the discussion in the news clip quickly moves to consider whether this is purely a grassroots movement.
Okay.
A perspective is introduced, suggesting that this recall could be a fallout from broader issues within the National Assembly, hinting at the involvement of vested political interests.
Okay, so let's dig a bit deeper there.
Sure.
Are they saying that this might not be just about the average voter in Kogi Central being unhappy?
Exactly. The argument being made is that the recall might be politically motivated, potentially involving third parties who aren't necessarily driven by the same concerns as the everyday constituents.
Right.
Of course, the counter to that is the sheer number of people reportedly signing the petition. It's difficult to entirely dismiss that as manufactured.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, how often are these kinds of public displays of political will truly organic? And when might other agendas be at play subtly or not so subtly influencing things?
This raises a really important question about the nature of political mobilization.
Right.
The news segment then begins to outline the recall process itself, at least as it's understood in this context.
Okay.
And third, the support for the recall needs to be demonstrated across all 5 of the local government areas that make up the Kogi Central Senatorial District.
So it's not just about a majority in one area.
Precisely. And the commentators in the news clip express a fair amount of skepticism about the likelihood of this recall actually succeeding.
Okay.
They point to the historical track record, noting that similar attempts in Nigeria have often faltered. However, there's a brief acknowledgement that maybe it will happen this first time, suggesting that past failures don't guarantee future outcomes.
Right. Historically, we've seen that the stringent verification processes and the need for broad support across multiple local governments often become really insurmountable logistical and political challenges,
Right.
effectively acting as a significant barrier to successful recalls.
Exactly.
So what specific hurdles do you foresee in a multi-stage process like this, especially in what sounds like a politically charged environment?
Well, the verification of a large number of signatures is a significant logistical undertaking in itself.
Yeah.
And it's often an area where challenges and disputes can arise. Ensuring that the support is spread across all 5 local government areas adds another layer of complexity.
Right.
You need to mobilize and convince people in diverse communities, which can be difficult if the underlying motivation isn't universally shared or deeply felt.
Right.
The Nigerian Constitution, specifically provisions for legislative accountability, outlines the mechanisms for recall, though the threshold for success is deliberately high to prevent frivolous attempts.
Okay, so this recall attempt isn't happening in isolation, is it?
Right.
It seems to be closely tied to Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan's recent suspension from the Senate.
Yes.
How do those two events connect?
That's definitely the context being highlighted. One perspective presented is that constituents might be reacting negatively to Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan's handling of the allegation of sexual assault. against the president of the Senate.
Okay.
The news segment suggests that there's a view among some that she may not have adequately communicated the situation or her actions regarding these very serious allegations to her constituency.
So from that perspective, the recall could be seen as a form of accountability, a response from the constituents to her conduct related to a prominent national issue.
Exactly. However, as we touched on with the idea of political motivation, there's a contrasting viewpoint.
Okay.
This perspective suggests that the recall effort is primarily being driven by her political opponents, who are seizing on the situation, including her suspension and the allegations, as an opportunity to undermine her position.
Yeah, it really boils down to trying to decipher the primary driver, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is it genuine grassroots discontent fueled by her actions, or is it more about strategic political maneuvering behind the scenes?
Precisely. And the news segment delves into a specific detail related to the allegations.
Okay.
They bring up Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan's interview with the BBC when he was in court, rather than relying solely on the Senate's internal processes.
So the advice there is to potentially take it out of the political arena and into the legal system if there's a strong legal case to be made. It really highlights the different ways these kinds of allegations can be addressed and the different standards of proof involved in each.
Absolutely. And the news segment further explores these differing interpretations of the constituent sentiment. There's a suggestion that some people believe the constituents were informed that Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan's initial 6-month suspension could potentially be extended, leading to a prolonged period of their senatorial district being unrepresented in the National Assembly.
Yeah.
Fear of that lack of representation could certainly galvanize people into demanding action.
That's a powerful motivator.
It is, but then this is contrast with the view that the constituents genuinely disapprove of Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan's conduct more broadly, which might encompass more than just the suspension itself. There's even an observation in the news segment that the senator hasn't yet shown any kind of remorse, although the specific actions or statements this refers to aren't detailed.
It's like trying to read the public mood, trying to understand the underlying motivations of a large and diverse group of people. It's rarely straightforward.
It's incredibly complex, and this leads to another, perhaps more cynical perspective that's raised in the news segment. The question is posed: if people can take money to vote for candidates, what will stop them from taking money to insist on recalling a senator?
Oh, wow. That's a stark and quite sobering question that really gets to the heart of potential vulnerabilities within the entire political process.
It does. It raises concerns about the potential influence of money, not just during elections, but also in these kinds of recall efforts.
Right.
It suggests that the motivations behind those signatures might not always be purely civic-minded, and that external financial factors could unfortunately play a role.
So to bring it all together, what are the key things we should take away from this deep dive into the news report?
Well, the recall process against Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan appears to have begun driven by what seems to be a combination of potential dissatisfaction among her constituents, possibly linked to her suspension from the Senate and the way she's handled certain allegations and the possibility of underlying political maneuvering. The actual recall process itself is multi-staged, and historically, such attempts in Nigeria have faced significant obstacles.
Right.
Therefore, the ultimate success of this particular recall remains very uncertain.
This whole situation really makes you think. It raises a fundamental question for you in our representative democracy. What truly defines that crucial link between an elected official and the people they represent? And what are the legitimate ways that link can be challenged or even severed? Is what we're seeing unfold in Kogi Central a genuine expression of the will of the people? Or are there other significant forces at play that are shaping this unfolding political drama? It's a complex situation with a lot of layers and definitely something worth continued reflection.